Number three. So we hired this investigator, and I suppose for 10 years or 15 years I've been looking at paperwork and trying to reach out to people, and then we get this investigator, and this lady's, we're graduate lady, and she starts to do some work for us and dig around some stuff, and again, more questions and answers. And I started to try and reach out to people, connect with your mob was one group, and I filled out the paperwork there, but it went nowhere. I didn't have enough answers. I didn't have enough information to give to them. Because Nana wasn't alive anymore. There was no one else I could talk to. I had these stories as a kid, and I don't. And when I say I didn't have enough information and I didn't get answers, I'm not assigning blame. I'm just trying to highlight how difficult it is to answer some of these questions. And you got to be pretty committed to trying to get an answer. You got to be asking this, and this is going to take time. And it took me time, and it took Melissa and I time and money to do it, and not a lot of money. Maybe $500 or $600 to get an investigator, but it's still money that you got to come up with on a project that you don't know where it's going, and you don't know what the return is. You don't even know why you're doing it. You just got an itch that needs to be scratched, and you want to scratch it. You want some sort of resolution. Why, you're not sure, but you just feel incomplete. And so, yeah, what was I saying? Where was I going? Oh, that's right. So I started to ask these questions and reach out to some people. So I think I'm from the Bunjalung mob, but I don't really know. So then I do some other research, and we've got the second fleet coming in, so that's the mob out around Hawkesbury area. So I send emails to these people because I'm based in Texas, asking them, and I got the lady in Bunjalung was really nice. The lady up there, Coral, I think her name was, she was really nice. But she really couldn't help me because I wasn't on country. And I don't think they're used to people being in dysphoria, blackfellas being in dysphoria, spat and scattered around the world, and just funny. Because we travelled so far from where we began to where we ended up. And but I couldn't get any answers. I wasn't on country. There was no slot for me. There was no box for me, which is really funny again, because blackfellas aren't like that. Our mindset's totally different. It's very much community yarning and a place to belong and a sense of bringing in and gathering. Yet there seems to be this white construct of box and forms filled over, which I understand at some point there needs to, but there was very little room to try and engage in a conversation. And the people in Windsor and Hawkesbury just weren't helpful at all. In fact, I was told flat out that if there wasn't something in it for that particular land council, which, they may get upset for me saying, but it's just the nature of things, and there was no way that I was going to be able to connect and ask the question of the elders there, which is unfortunate, because I've met some elders that are tied in with that land council, and they're exceptional. Exceptional. Uncle Dennis was phenomenal. The lady up in Bunjalung was phenomenal. She was a secretary. She wasn't on an eldership on the land council. So I ask these questions. I send these emails. I send dozens and dozens of these things all over to anyone. The people in the National Records Office was good, but there was no place for me, no spot for me. And I was literally at the end of myself with not knowing what to do. And then this information came up about the stolen generation. So I reached out to a group called Link Up New South Wales. And they dealt exclusively with stolen generation stuff. And, I thought, this is going to be my last hurrah. You can only go so long on asking a question, and if you don't get any sort of resolution, it becomes really frustrating, and there's a sense as I've just got to move on with my life. I've got to get on. I'm just going to have to drag this particular baggage around with me and not have an answer. I'm 60, maybe it's a pipe dream that there's something there, or there's just a shadow of memory, as opposed to a calling, which is a different thing I want to touch on about being called home. It's which, when it happens to you, is a very real thing that happens when you're called back to country. So it was on probably a Friday afternoon, and I'm calling from Texas, and I sit there looking at my phone, waiting till it went 9:01 at Sydney time, and I called. You're never going to get a 9:01 from a government office. No one's ever going to answer the phone at 9:01, but they did, and Alyssa did, and she was just the sweetest person. I mean, she heard me rambling on about being a guy in Texas who believes he has Aboriginal roots but has no way of identifying, and I've got all this paper and I've got all this information, and what do I do? What do I do? And I'm really just dumping emotionally 20 years of journey on this receptionist, and she listened. I could hear her smiling, being patient, deliberately patient in the background, and I bless her for it, because this was probably going to be the last phone call I was ever going to make. And then I was put through to a lady called Jessica, and then onto a counsellor called Luke. And their attitude was exactly the same. They wanted to listen, they wanted to understand, and they were interested in me, which was a different thing. It was a very different experience. So I was able to start to unpack this process of who am I, what is my background, where have I come from, and try to come to terms with some of those things.